Namaste and good morning, all of you. Let's start our Mahabharata class with some prayers first. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhuvaswaha, Tatsavitra Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Asto ma satgamya, tamso ma jyotirgamya, mrityorma amritam gamya. Om Sahnavavatu Sahnabhanatu Saviryam Karvavahi Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshavahi. Om Shanti 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 Om. Let's open our books on page number 655. Markandeya's lore. So Rishi Markandeya is visiting the Pandavas in their exile. When they had not been long in the Dvetvan, monsoon winds began to sweep across the land and dark clouds gathered heavily above Bharatvarsh. The rains came, lashing forest and earth with the healing showers. The Saraswati swelled in her banks, a turbulent goddess, and the lake of lotuses spilt over. The scent of those flowers and of wet earth filled the Pandavas with hope. Each day, the end of their exile drew nearer. When the monsoon passed, Yudhishthir said, Indra said we should go back to the Kamyak Vana, and I have this persistent feeling someone wants to visit us there. They returned to the forest ashram of their exile. It was strange, settling down in the old clearing, where little had changed. The big Niagara still stood there, with green shoots of the latest rain sprouting on its branches. It was like returning to the fringes of another life, which still excluded them for less than 2 years more. Yudhishthir was worried that the Kamyak might evoke the old impatience in him. Instead, Bhim took to visiting the rishis of the forest with him. The son of the wind would sit entirely absorbed in whatever conversation Yudhishthir had with the hermits, and not a word out of him. Then one day Krishna arrived with Satyabhama. There was such a reunion. They hugged one another repeatedly, and when Krishna clasped Arjun to him, it seemed he would never let the Pandavas go. He whispered in Arjun's ear, I have heard all about your stay in Amravati. I am so proud of you. They as they did every time Dark Krishna was with them. Joy was upon them, and he, the uncanny blue one, was as cheerful as ever. When they sat under the banyan tree, Krishna said, Subhadra and Abhimanyu are with us in Dwarka now. He is a splendid Kshatriya and a better archer than you, Arjun. Draupadi, your sons have also come to Dwarka to study archery with me. Drishtadhyumna brought them from Kampilya, and each one is an image of his father. Sometimes I feel you five are with me in my city, but grown younger. Tears rolled down Draupadi's face for her sons she had not seen for 11 years. Seeing her cry, Satyabhama took her hand and they went off into the ashram, and Draupadi was grateful for the company of another woman. When they had gone, Krishna leaned forward and a glint in his eye whispered, Yudhishthir, you have served 11 years of exile. If you ask me, 11 years too many. Why wait any longer? The army of Dwarka is prepared. Drupad and Drishtadhyumna are ready with their legions. The Kake brothers strain as if at a leash to attack Hastinapur. Let us ride now. We will take them by surprise and crush them before they realize that retribution has arrived. Why must you torment yourself anymore? Why suffer another year of this indignity and then one more of going like beggars in disguise? Let us go and kill Dhritarashtra and his sons today. He sounded earnest, but Yudhishthir smiled and said quietly, "Feel about this. We must see out another 2 years somehow, and then ride on Hastinapur army my poor game, but I must wait." Then incredibly, Bhim said, "I agree, we should be the helpful visitors we have." There was a twinkle in Bhim's eye, and Krishna flung an arm around him and burst out laughing. Yes, Bhim just 2 years, some weeks, and it was a happy time. The wildest beasts of the jungle would come to the hermitage and stand gazing at the dark one. Deer would walk right up to him, nuzzle their faces in his hand as he stroked them and spoke to them just as if they were human children. A few days after Krishn's arrival, the Pandav had another visitor whose fund of lore was always a source of delight. The ever youthful Markandeya was a masterly Puranika, and Krishna was the most eager of them all to hear the Maharishi's tales. When the sage, who arrived at nightfall, had been with them for an hour, and a simmering moon rose above the forest, Krishna said, "Muni, they say you have no equal in the world as a Puranika. When I was a boy, my mother Yashoda would tell me a story every night when she put me to bed. How well she told them, I felt I was part of the Purana she was recounting. I could see its spaces before my eyes, I could smell its forests and flowers, and the characters would appear before me, real enough to touch. Muni, I don't believe there is any storyteller to match my mother, but we shall give you a chance to prove yourself her equal." Bhim, who loved a good story, cried, "Come, Muni, give us a legend or two. The night is perfect for it." Markandeya did not need much persuading, but launched into some shining tales of the eldest days. At the end of the last kalp, the three worlds were plunged in a solitary, undistinguished night. Began that rishi. There was nothing but a single dark sea everywhere. Ek Arnav. There were no devas, no rishis, nothing but the black sea. Upon that desolate and awesome sea, the Lord Vishnu Narayan slept on the interminable serpent Anantashesh. 1,000 heads Vishnu had, 1,000 arms and feet, and 1,000 eyes. He wore a fulved yellow robe. Markandeya glanced at Krishna's electric garment and continued, "Narayan's eyes were like suns, and his body was immeasurable as infinite sky, the hue of blue clouds. As he slept, out of his navel a white lotus sprouted, its corolla blue, its stalk golden and endless. It was the heart of the worlds. The primal lotus and its divine scent spread everywhere. Within that first sacred flower, Brahma was born, the creator, four-faced and irradiant. The lotus-born Pitama, grandsire of all beings, poured forth creation. First he gave out the waters, fire, air, the sky, the wind, and the earth, the rivers and the oceans, mountains, and the ancestral trees. Then the moments, the hours, the days, the weeks, the fortnights, the months, the half years, the yugas, the manvantras, and the kalps flowed from him. He made the Saptarishi sons born immaculately from his mind. Marichi, Daksh, Bhrigu, Angiras, Pulaste, Pulaha, and Pratu. From his breath came Daksh. Marichi from his eye, Angiras from his head, and the rest from other parts of Brahma's body. And with the advent of the seven sages, Dharam had a human form. Markandeya paused to be sure they were listening. None of them stirred. His Puran was hypnotic. He continued, then Brahma made the other living beings. Tamas was the quality that first arose in that Prajapati. He excluded the Asurs from his hind parts, and they were his firstborn from his body. Brahma abandoned his creative body, and at that moment, from the castaway form, night was born, full of darkness and sleep. And the demons, the Asurs, worship the night and are strongest during the hours of darkness. Brahma assumed another body, and this had the essence of Sattva. From it he made the Devas, beings of light, exuded them from his face. He abandoned the body of Sattva, and because it was made of light, day was born from it. Thus the Devas worshipped the day. Brahma took yet another form of Sattva, and from this the Pitris, the mains, were born. When he cast off this body, it became the twilight, Sandhya, which all beings of both darkness and light worship. Now Krishna murmured, "Ah, Markandeya, you are a sublime Pranika." They all glanced at the dark one and saw by the streaming moon that his eyes brimmed with yawning visions. It was as if Krishna gazed directly into the times and events Markandeya described. They waited impatiently for the Rishi to continue. These were not tales that any of them had not heard before, but they had never heard them told like this. So they came alive, and the silver sky was filled with a primeval sea, an interminable serpent, a shadowy blue god, a shining lotus, and all the rest. Markandeya resumed. Now Brahma assumed a body of Rajas, and from that form of his passionate sons, men were born. When he abandoned that body, it became the dawn. He assumed yet another material body made of Sattva, Tamas, and Rajas, all three, and from it sprang the Rakshasas who roam the night and are creatures of both darkness and passion. From that body of mixed gunas also came the Yakshas and Gandharvas, the Nags, the Kinnars, and Charans, and other divine beings. Then he created the birds of the air and the beasts of the wilds. Trees, herbs, and plants were born from Brahma's hair. From his eastern mouth, the Gayatri mantra issued, and the Rig Veda and the melody of the Saman, and the Agni's tone Yajna, and his southern mouth, the Yajur Veda, the Brit Saman melody, the Trishutva mantra from the western mouth, and the Sam Veda and Jagati mantra, the Verupa and Atirath Yajna, and from his northern mouth, the Atharva Veda, the Aptoyaman Yajna, and Anushtup mantra, and the Vairaj Saman. So here you can see that Creator created this all. It's not a theory of evolution, it's a theory of creation. God can create just like that. Doesn't have to go from the amoeba all the way to humans. From all his limbs, he emitted the various creatures. The Muni, who now sang his Puran softly, paused, and Yudhishthir said, Rishi, tell us about the Yugas. Markandeya said, 15 Nimeshas instance is a Kashta. 30 Kashtas is a Kal. 30 Kals is a Muhurat. 30 Muhurats long are a day and a night. 365 days and nights make a human year, and one day and night of the gods. We learned all about this the time in our reading of Bhagavad Puran also. 4 are the ages called the Yugas, the Krit, the Treta, the Dwapar, and the Kali. So Krit is another name for Satya. 12,000 divine years long are the 4 ages together. The pristine Krit Yug lasts for 4,000 years of the Devas. So remember, these are the Dev years, not human years. And for 800 years more, it's a twilight. Okay, so there's a twilight also time. The second Yuga, the Treta, lasts for 3,000 years of the Devas, and for 600 years, it's dawn and dusk. The Dwapar Yuga, the third age, lasts for 2,000 years of the Devas, and 400 cosmic years, it's cusps. The final Yuga, the Kali, the age of evil, is for 1,000 celestial years, and 200 years is twilights. And then another Krita Yuga, begins. 1,000 Yuga chakras, wheels of 12,000 years each, is a day and a night of Brahma. 14 manvantras are a day of Brahma, called a kalpa. Each manvantra is 852,000 divine years and 367 million human years. At the end of each day of the Creator, the worlds, the stars, and galaxies are all recalled into dissolution, which is called the pralaya. While Brahma sleeps through his night, which lasts as long as his day. When he awakens again, he pours forth the worlds once more. 1 year of Brahma lasts for 300 years and 65 such days and nights, with all their creations and dissolutions. Brahma's life lasts for 100 years of such days and nights. At present, O Kshatriyas, half Brahma's life is over. This is the first kalpa of the second half of Brahma's life, his 51st year. It is the kalpa called Varaha. Markandeya's eyes glowed in the moonlight, and the soft excitement gripped his listeners at his account of time. How small and insignificant all their trials and concerns seemed against the immensity he enjoyed. Krishna cried, "But tell us the nature of Yugas, O perfect Markandeya. I have heard everything that happens in time is determined, first and last, by the nature of the age in which it occurs." He flashed a smile. "Even the lives of the avatars, I am told." Markandeya bowed to Krishna. "Knower of all things, it is true, indeed, that the age determines everything that happens within its span. All that are born during each yuga are influenced by the spirit of the yuga, how long they shall live, what course their lives will take, and how great or worthless they shall be. Because all beings are subject to their own natures and their natures of the primary nature of the yuga. As for the avatars of Krishna, they are not influenced by the yuga, but only seem to be. But yes, they also assume the outward remnant of nature in their lives and their deeds, and these surely belong to the yuga into which each avatar is born." Full of information, this chapter. Next chapter, the four yugas. Krishna laughed happily. He said, "How simply you illumine the most profound mysteries, Muni. Now tell us about the different natures of the yugas." Markandeya said, "The Krit is the immaculate age, when there is no trace of evil on earth. Eternal Dharam is 4-footed in the Krit Yuga, but only 3-footed in the Treta. Because evil enters the world during the second age, Dharam stands on just 2 feet in the Dwapar, and in the Kali Yuga, princes, Dharam barely survives, hobbling on just 1 foot. In the pristine Krit Yuga, Dhyan is said to be the highest virtue. Gyan is the Treta Yuga, Yagya in the Dwapar, and Bhakti in the Kali Yuga, Kali of vice and darkness. Brahma is the Lord of Krita, Surya of the Treta, Vishnu of the Dwapar, and Rudra of the Kali. Brahma, Vishnu, and Surya are all worshipped in the Kali Yuga, and Shiva, who bears the Pinak in all the 4 yugas. Pinak is what? It's a celestial bow of Lord Shiva. It's called Pinak. In the Krita Yuga, every creature is perfectly contented. They live at peace with themselves and in harmony with the divine Brahma. Their livelihood arises in spontaneity from their pleasure in it. In the Krit, there is no distinction between the best and worst of men. They are all equally gifted in wisdom, in longevity, and in beauty. They are free from sorrow and given to seeking solitude. They are tapaswins, and their goal is Mahadeva Shiva. They live without selfishness of any kind and are full of natural joy, dwelling endlessly in their hearts. They have no permanent homes, but live either beside the ocean or upon mountains. In the Krita Yuga also, children are born from sexual intercourse, but the ecstasy of lovemaking is much more profound and prolonged than it is in the lesser ages. Krishna sighed, ah, indeed, but then the men and women of those times were more like gods, weren't they, Muni? They lived for thousands of years, if I remember what my mother Yashoda told me. Markandeya went on. At the end of the Krita Yuga, the natural fount of joy in the hearts of the people of the earth dried up. But another blessing arose, as if in its place. When the eternal well springs ran dry in the hearts of men, those waters appeared materially in the sky as clouds. Sacred rain fell upon the world, life giving and full of bliss. When that precious deluge covered the surface of the earth, lustrous trees sprang up. These trees were called homes or pandavas, and they were the ancestors of our trees of today. The people of the world got their food from the tree as they did anything else they wished for. And they too were as happy as the men and women of the Krita Yuga. The trees were full of visions which moved the spirits of those who sat near them to rapture. But then evil came to the earth. It came first into men's hearts, where there was a void left by the cessation of the waters of joy, which were suksham, subtle, spiritual of God. When the evil seeds sprouted in the hearts of the men of the Treta Yuga, they grew passionate and greedy. And the wishing trees, which they had called their homes, vanished from the world. The men and women of the earth were repentant and returned to the path of Dharma. They still craved all that the trees had given them, but they knew their greed had made the trees disappear. So, what are these trees? These are the Kalaptarus, wish fulfilling trees. Once more, the trees called homes reappeared across the earth, and now they gave the people clothing, fruit, and ornaments. Cavities in the trees were full of divine honey, which no bees or birds fed on. The men of the earth lived on their ambrosial honey and were content. Joy returned to them for many years, but the evil which had sprung once in their hearts did not die. After a while, the people of the Treta Yuga turned to greed and violence again. For the first time, they seized the wishing trees for themselves, making possessions of them and attacking one another to own them. The trees vanished again from the world as suddenly as they had first appeared. Bitter days fell on the people of the Treta Yuga. The elements turned against them in wrath. Savage extremes of heat and cold beset them. Burning rains fell on them, and they built shelters for themselves against the fury of nature. Many perished for their enemies in those days of retributions. Many perished for their crimes in those days of retribution, and the people of the earth turned back to meditation, to seek their souls in dhyan, so some peace may return to the world. The rains turned mild over the earth again. They flowed down mountains and valleys as the first rivers, flowing always into the ocean. Now the first herbs of the earth sprouted from the alchemy between the new rain and the soil. As if to answer the prayers of the people, 14 great trees reappeared in the world with the flowers and trees and fruits. A brief time of peace came to the earth, but evil had taken root in men's hearts, and it diminished the people of the Treta Yuga as the age wore on inexorably to fulfill its destiny. Avarice and passion rose again, and men seized field and tree, village and shelter for themselves. They seized their brothers' women. The lust for possessions overcame them, and perhaps it was because they were afraid of losing all these again. The life giving herbs disappeared back into the ground. Desolation stalked the world again. It was then at the command of the mains that Prithu milked the earth. Again, violence swept the land as rapacity mastered the dwindled men of the Treta Yuga. It was in those fateful days that Brahma created the Kshatriyas to rule the earth, to curtail the anarchy that had seized her, and to bring peace to the Brahmins. It was in the Treta Yuga that the classes of men were ordained, and each Varan was given his own dharma by God, by which they could aspire to nirvana. Those times are inscrutable, for great wonders and various blessings were still upon the earth. After the first agonies of transformation, men lived in harmony again with themselves and all the mysterious and divine forces in the world. Thus the Treta Yuga wore on, and then the Dwapar Yuga dawned. The evil in men's heart took many forms by now, some subtle and some openly sinister. The Dwapar was an age of conflict, and men doubted the very nature of truth. While the Veda had been single and sacred in the Treta, in the Dwapar it was divided in four by the son of Prashar and the river Ganga. And we all know about that story, the birth of Rishi Vyas. Anxiety arose among men, suspicion and an abhorrence for life itself. They could no longer distinguish between truth and illusion. For the first time, disease swept the world as monstrous plagues. Drought came to the earth, and terrible suffering, because of which men began to think about liberation from birth and death, to think of moksha. They thought of the futility of life, the emptiness of desire. They meditated upon their own deepest natures. Rajas and Tamas arose to dominate half the Dwapar Yuga in war, doubt, and strange knowledge, born from brutal conflict. Man's very mind divided against him. He became a power and a law unto himself, divorced from the natural world. He sought to control his suffering and was alienated from the natural earth. Yet all these dark tendencies were tempered, curbed by the profound virtue that men had inherited from the Krita Yuga and the Treta as well. But in the Kali, the age of wrath and darkness, the earth becomes a realm of night. And the Sattva Gun is all but lost in dominating sinfulness. It is in the spiritual apostates of the Brahmans that the evil of Kali Yuga is rooted. For the holy ones are corrupted in that age, and forgetting Dharma, they turn to unthinkable sins. Why in the Kali Yuga the twice born themselves are ignorant of the Veda? Markandeya sighed as if he could hardly bear the thought. The Pandavas shuddered at the mention of the Kali, the fell Yuga that lay in wait around the corner of time. Krishna alone was as serene as ever. He said with a laugh, but the Kali is the age into which every spirit of all the other ages prays to be born. For it is the easiest age in which to have moksha. Softly he said, they say that in the Kali Yuga, a man need not perform any great deed or sacrifice. He need not even be pure. Let him but take the name of God, and he shall be liberated. Is this true, O Markandeya? There were fathomless mysteries beneath the surface of his words. Did he tone gently mock the rishi? Was there so much the sage had left out of what he said, which indeed he did not begin to suspect? Great truths the dark Krishna knew. Other worlds stirred in the heart of the earth. Unknown, unknowable, legendary dimensions, all of them uncannily part of Krishna's mystery. The Pandavas saw their cousin transformed. It was not a physical change, but for that instant he seemed to encompass the very universe within himself. The moment passed. Krishna smiled at them. He looked at Markandeya, who seemed to have turned to stone in the avatar's mystic moment. The blue one said, Muni, you have not answered my question about the Kali Yuga. Is it true what they say that it is the simplest age for a man to attain moksha in? Is it enough for a man to chant the name of God in the evil yuga for him to find nirvana? And now here was another mystery. Krishna was full of earnest inquiry. He was an anxious seeker, truly as if he sought liberation for himself, or as if he could liberate all mankind if he only found moksha first, as if all time was just Krishna's quest for his own freedom. Markandeya and the Pandavas sat absorbed in the dark one's mystery. Somehow they had never thought of him as a seeker. They realized now, especially the Pandavas, that they had never thought of him as having any needs of his own. Krishna flashed his smile again, breaking the trance. He urged Markandeya once more. Tell us, Muni, about the Kali Yuga. Forgive my foolish interruptions. I only wondered about moksha and how it was to be had most easily. Markandeya said in a low voice, Krishna, there is nothing on heaven and earth that you do not know. But it is indeed, as you say, the Kali is the simplest age in which a man may find moksha, and he can find it by just saying the name of God. Yet the reason for this is not simple. For a man suffers horribly merely by being born into the age of wrath. He suffers undreamt of terror constantly from within himself and from the world as well. He lives shrouded in evil. Every breath he draws is in fear. In the Kali Yuga, the kings who sit upon the thrones of the earth will have neither tranquility nor dharma. They will be men mainly of tamas, full of rage, vanity, and lust, full of lies. They will find their pleasure in inflicting torment and death on their subjects, even women and children, and they rise to power just briefly and then fall away. The kings of the Kali will be short lived, greedy, and rapacious. The people will be contaminated by the customs of others. Kings will employ wild barbarians and murderers, and these will have their say in the violent affairs of state. And with the people living in perversion, far from Dharam, ruin will come to all the land. Wealth alone will confer nobility, regardless of a man's birth or his character. Power alone will define virtue. Pleasure will be the only reason for marriage. Seductiveness, the quintessence of womanhood. In disputes of justice, the ability to distort the truth will determine who prevails. Just wearing a thread will determine who is a Brahmin. For the twice born will lose their dharam and be steeped in sin themselves. They will not have dhyan, gyan, yajna, or bhakti in the age of night. All the world will be plunged in a turbid darkness of the spirit, and the earth will be full of deceit and passion, greed and wrath. The precious waters of the soil will dry up at the fearsome ways of men. A man's worth will be decided not by his truthfulness, by his wisdom or goodness, but only by the wealth he has amassed by even the vilest means. Arrogance and sin will pass for wisdom and righteousness, brashness and a loud voice for scholarship. Only the poor will have any honesty or virtue left, and the powerful will make life so miserable for them that they too will become corrupt. Feebleness will be the only reason for not being employed. Just a bath in water will come to signify purification, and charity will be the only surviving virtue. Unimaginable evil will engulf the sons of men. Abduction will be equal to marriage, and wearing costly clothes and ornaments to dharma. The very affection of being great will pass for greatness, and boastfulness for erosion. Men of power, men of great faults within themselves, and kings with the hearts of monsters will rule the earth. Oppressed beyond endurance by their rulers, the good people of the world will flee the macabre cities of kings to hide in secret valleys between mountains, where they will turn to nature for succor, living off wild honey, roots and fruits, birds and flowers. Violence and perversions will rot the cities and all the land. Terrible wars and demonic diseases will decimate the human race, and savage cold and scathing heat, scorching droughts, and sweeping floods will terrorize the people of the Kali Yuga. Until the earth will be a hell in creation, where souls are born for no pleasure at all, but only searing expiation. Yudhishthir said quietly, already there are omens of what is to come, because that was the end of, close to the end of Dwapara. It is not far from us, said Markandeya. Why it is prophesied that with your war against the sons of Dhritarashtra, the Kali Yuga will begin. He paused and said in a low voice, and it will truly set in when Krishna leaves the world. Krishna murmured thoughtfully, yes, it will be rare for men to even say the name of God in the age of ego. Okay. And so they will indeed find moksha if they do with a devout heart, put in the rishi. Bhim said, I pray I will not see much of that wretched time. But tell us, O Markandeya, Does the world itself end with the Kali Yuga? At the end of the Kali Yuga, when the earth has been ravaged and laid waste by men's sins, a drought arises that lasts for 100 years, with not a day's rain. Every creature in the world will perish, all the species, and Shiva comes as Rudra for the dissolution. In an awesome form, he comes. He enters the seven rays of the sun as transcendent fire and subsumes the myriad waters of the earth, draining them into himself. Oceans and rivers he absorbs, lakes, mountain springs, and streams he dries up the darkling waters of Patal. Then those seven rays he has entered become seven separate suns blazing in the sky. They set alight in three worlds as cotton balls dipped in ghee. Mountains, seabeds, green valleys, islands, the continents are all ignited and burn like dry grass in that firestorm. When Rudra has consumed the worlds, he stands upon the cosmic ether, and from his chasmal mouth banks of clouds issue, greater than galaxies, clouds like vast elephant herds in fathomless space, thunder roaring clouds gashed with immense lightning to blind the terrified devas in heaven. Some clouds are dark like the twilight lotus, which bloomed once in jungle hearts. Some are yellow, others amber. Some have the color and the texture of a chrysoberyl, others of sparkling sapphire, and yet others are like a red lacquer. Some clouds have the shapes of sea conches, some of jasmine flowers of crystal in the sky. These are white as goose feathers, but streaked with lightning black as gold. But others are menacing, themselves dark as night. Still others are bright as blue jays' wings and peacock feathers. Swiftly, there are towns of clouds in the sky, mountain ranges of them, there are unimaginable palaces in the firmament, and the strangest faces, some calm, some demented, staring with eyes of fire, latticed with veins of lightning. The cloud banks roll to deafen even the Devas' dimensions, which are not material. Then they open in the sky and a sheet rain falls over the inferno that rages upon the three worlds below in a day and a night. The rain has extinguished the conflagration of God, which consumed his creation at the end of each Kali Yuga. The destruction stops with this deluge. But at the end of a Kalapa, 1,000 cycles of Yugas, the Pralaya does not stop. It rains on endlessly, torrents pouring down by night and day in the unnatural light, until the worlds dissolve in those tidal waters and the seven suns are extinguished in the sky. The loftiest world, Bhuvalok, on high, is flooded, and a watery night falls over all of creation. Still, those rains do not stop. They pour on for 100 years without pause. At last, the precious waters have swollen into the realm of the Saptarishi, and the ocean covers everything. It is upon this infinite sea that the pipal leaf floats, my princess, and the lord of the Kalap, the blue infant who sucks on his toe, lies on that singular, resplendent leaf. From his mouth issue great winds to blow away the clouds of the Pralaya. For 100 years, these winds blow before the clouds are all scattered. Then Hari is Narayana, lying upon his eternal serpent bed. Anant Shana as both Vishnu and Brahma, who lies in the golden lotus that sprouts from Vishnu's navel. Both sleep for as long as Brahma's night lasts. Out on that ocean of hardly a ripple, at the end of 1,000 Chaturyugas, Brahma stirs again. Once more he pours forth creation. Krishna fetched a contented sigh when Markandeya finished. He breathed, "Ah, good Rishi, you are indeed a wonderful Puranika. Why, I would even say you are my mother Yashoda's equal." Sahadev said, "Tell us more, Muni, your Puran enchants us." "Yes, do," Krishna said. "How I love these old stories." His tone was fathomless. They stayed up almost until dawn, while the Rishi Markandeya told them a score of tales of the oldest times about all the yugas. He told them of Dhundmar, of Kuvalaswar, and of the Rishi Angiras, about Agni. Markandeya told them, and the fire god's love for Swaha. Of the first war in heaven, he spoke when Som, the moon, abducted Brihaspati's wife Tara, and the Devas and the Asuras fought. He described other wars also vividly, the churning of the sea for Amrit and the incarnations of the Lord Vishnu. He told them about the Asura Tarak and the strange boon he had from Brahma, that only a son born to ascetic Shiva, the Mahayogi, could kill him. He described the birth of Parvati, who was once a Sati, who killed herself, how she grew in her father's Himvan's palace, how Shiva came to a nearby Tapovan and was deceived by Kam into love, how Shiv made calm ashes of the wedding of Shiv and Parvati, Markandeya told, and the birth of Kartikeya, child of wonder in the bank of Sargras, and how the child slew Tarkasur on a fateful seashore. That was on the first night. Finally, Markandeya yawned. I think we should stop for tonight. Let us resume tomorrow when the storyteller and his listeners are fresh. So they turned in, their minds alight with visions, such dreams they dreamt that night, and the Pandav princes' dreams they would remember nothing of except that they were splendorous. So let's stop it here. We'll start with the page number 670 next week with the foolish Brahman, that is the tale. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you very much.